Thank you all for coming tonight. Welcome to the Fleming Museum of Art's spring programming kickoff. This artist talk with Mohamad Hafez. My name is Alice Boone, and I'm the curator of
Nothing's gonna happen. Call to prayer. Back to introduction. Sorry, Alice.
Oh, no, that was great. Thank you. I'm the curator of education and public programs. I wanted to thank you all for coming tonight. I also wanted to thank the staff of the Fleming Museum for really sort of putting on programming in a very complex, always fluid scheduling situation that we're all living through. So I wanted to thank Stephanie Glock, the business manager, Chris Dissinger, the assistant director, Phil Moran, who's our new guest services coordinator, Susie Zahner, who's our new preparator, Margaret Tamulonis, the collections manager, who oversaw bringing all of this to UVM, and Andrea Rosen, our curator, who has departed UVM, but really did an enormous amount of work to bring all of this together. So I wanted to thank everyone on the staff, and I wanted to begin this evening's presentation with a land acknowledgement. The Fleming Museum is situated on land that has served as a site of meeting and exchange among indigenous peoples for thousands of years, and is the home of the Western Abenaki people. The museum's collection holds cultural belongings and artworks of other indigenous peoples from throughout the world. We resolve to build mutual, substantive relationships with indigenous peoples as the foundation of our work going forward, so that we can center their knowledge and expertise in caring for and reinterpreting these collections. This acknowledgement is our affirmation of our responsibility to act as an institution within a larger institution to address past inequities and erasures of indigenous sovereignty and heritage in Vermont and globally. Indeed, Mohamad Hafez's talk tonight highlights the ways that land is not an abstraction. It's home. In showing what global refugees have left behind in their homes, he immerses all of us in a sense of the meaning that objects have for people when they are lost, seized, looted, and left behind. And then his work gives us ways of thinking about restitution going forward. So a Syrian-American artist and architect, Mohamad Hafez was born in Damascus, raised in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and educated in the Midwestern United States. Hafez's art reflects the political turmoil in the Middle East through the compilation of found objects, paint, and scrap metal. Using his architectural skills, Hafez sculpturally recreates rooms, homes, buildings, and landscapes that have suffered the ravages of war. Each is embedded with the voices and stories of real people from Afghanistan, Congo, Syria, Iraq, and Sudan, who have escaped these same rooms and buildings to build a new life in America. Their stories are then collected by Mohamad's partner in this project, who is himself an Iraqi refugee. Mohamad Hafez's artwork has recently been featured in several highly acclaimed exhibitions and profiled on National Public Radio, the New York Times, The Guardian, The New Yorker, which you'll see tonight. Hafez is the recipient of a 2018 Connecticut Arts Hero Award for his extensive and continuous body of work on issues such as the Syrian civil war, the worldwide refugee crisis, and an overall desire to counter hate speech. He currently serves as a 2018 Yale University Stillman College Fellow, interpreter in residence at the University of Chicago Oriental Institute, and an artist in residence at the Keller Center of Harris School of Public Policy at the University of Chicago. 2019, he was selected as one of the 40 under 40 artists in the Middle East by London's Apollo magazine. And since then, there's many, many more things that he has to speak with us tonight about. So I will turn it over to him. Thank you all tonight.
Thank you, Alex. Well, hello, beautiful Vermonters. You braved the winter and COVID, and you came out. And I'm told this is the very first talk since COVID has started. So I feel, thank you. I'm going to be walking around Connecticut and telling people, I'm the guy who got Vermonters out of their house since 2 years. Thank you for coming, really. I figured for tonight we'll do a special offer. Buy one, get two free. No, I'm just kidding. Come on, you can relax. You can relax. First, he starts with a call to prayer, and then he sells rags, and then, Allahu Akbar. Allah. Okay, relax. It's okay. It's going to be fun. I found out through humor and art, we can demolish a lot of walls that are built by crazy people in this world. So I figured today I'll just walk you through my process and how this all came to be. A little bit of history about me. I come from a family of 4 siblings, 2 parents. Grew up in Saudi Arabia. We're originally from Syria, and the family members now live. My dad lived in 22 years in Germany. My sister is now a refugee in Sweden. My other sister is in Chicago. I went to school in Iowa. I live in Connecticut. My other brother is in Dubai. And between all of us, we visited these countries over 5 decades. We made friendships in the blue dots. So the question of home to me is always, what is home? Is it really a geographical place? Or could it be, that yes, Syria is home, but equally Connecticut is another home for me, and Dubai is another home for my family, and so on. So I thought I'd show you my family. This is my mom, 2 sisters, sister-in-law, brother, and the little monkeys. Unlike what normal Joe would think about Saudi Arabia in the 80s, we grew up around very international folks. Given that my father was a retired physician, we had a lot of international folks around us. And my dad built a beautiful house for us in Syria. So this is not Thanksgiving dinner. This is Friday's dinner. And this is, just immediate family. So, moving back from Saudi Arabia to Damascus was really a mind-opening experience for me as a teenager, where I got introduced to okay, now I know my roots. This is my family. We're like Italians. Everybody's in everybody's business, and it's like, whew. Anyway, and going back to Damascus was really interesting for me because I got to learn my roots, where my dad was born. 50 feet away from the Umayyad Mosque over here. Damascus is such a fantastic city. It's 50% Muslim, 50% Christian. It is actually the longest continuously inhabited city in the world. So as you walk through the city roads, not only are you seeing architecture that belonged to the Islamic and biblical era, but Roman and Greek and you name it. So as somebody that's today an architect, as a teenager interested in architecture, I'm walking through this living museum of millennia worth of architecture, and of course our dear people will deal with it like it's day-to-day object, like okay, here's a 2,000-year-old wall, I'm going to install an air conditioner on it. What? It's hot. What are you talking about? It's hot. I want to, Habibi, yalla, get out of here. I tell you. So, anyhow, so up until 2002, when I decided to follow the footsteps of my brother, I said, okay, I'd like to come to the United States. So that's how it all started. I came here about 20 years ago. To my surprise, Syrians and 23 other nationalities were under a travel ban in the Bush administration. Of course, they were smarter than to call it a travel ban. They called it NSEERS, National Security Entry-Exit Registration System, which meant for 23 nationalities, our visas, student visas, were stamped single entry only. So you're more than welcome to study here and stay here. You ain't going back home, son. So, and for somebody like me, what they saw is a Muslim Arab Syrian named Muhammad, raised in Saudi Arabia, beard, Allahu Akbar, danger, S on my boarding pass. Yes, and randomly selected for security checks in airports, randomly, very random. So, you know, the result is 10 years in exile here, while studying and trying to fulfill my career. And that's how it all started. I was a young, naive architecture student in college. It was Thanksgiving dinner. You know, I'm not going to say more, but we're going to share a little bit of a New Yorker documentary about how this work started. So that's the special today, that you got, you know, buy one get one free. So you're gonna see a documentary. I've never done this in my talks. I'm usually a talking head, but today I said probably people are sick of talking heads on Zoom. So let's watch our little documentary today. It's 20 minutes. I promise you'll be intrigued, and then we'll open it for Q&A. So my first artworks were cast plaster, imitation of what I would remember from back home, and then I would build these things and detail them till the cows come home. And I've done that for 12 years in secret, alongside my architectural career. I was blessed to graduate and go work for the person that designed the Petronas Towers in Malaysia, John Pickard, and Bill Chilton, who designed the Kingdom Tower in Saudi Arabia. Just like life does its quirks. When I grew up in Saudi Arabia, my middle school was literally a block away from this building. And then I ended up working for the guy. So here's John, here's Bill, really nice Midwest people. They both went to Iowa State, where I went. They present themselves as really cool, down-to-earth Midwest people, but they do really good work. So you get the New York-style architecture without the New York-style ego of architects. So they taught me quite a bit. John, I guess, saw something and threw me in the deep water and said, son, sink or swim. So if you're an immigrant named Muhammad, Muslim, having gone 10 years of exile, well, guess what? You swim, you don't. So for many, many years of my life, I was Mr. Corporate Architect, clean-shaven, Mauricio. They thought I was Italian, whatever. So this was my latest. This was my latest puppy in Houston. I would be, clean-shaven. I would fly around, designing tall buildings, working with top echelon companies, meeting really high-profile people that, in closed rooms on dinner tables turn out not to be that high profile, but very normal people with very similar ideas to some lunatics out there. Anyway, and on side by side with that fast-paced life I was living, the war in Syria had started. And of course, for somebody like me that hasn't been in the country for about a decade at the time, watching the beloved Syria, the beloved architecture that I walked through, turn from a 1,000-year-old minaret to a bunch of rubble, watching this wealth of archaeology and architecture getting bombed out of existence, watching my news feed being like this, and then over here watching all the rhetoric that we all went through against Syrian refugees, immigrants in general, Muslims, you name it. I was very troubled, you know. There was a huge contrast in my life. The clean-shaven Mr. Mauricio that would show up to work, hi, and then, you know, you go home to the other reality of what's happening back home. So I took to art. That's how it started. I knew it helped me in college, so I continued making art in secret. And so the difference is my earlier work was a lot more nostalgic. My later work became a lot more kind of visually represents the war and the aftermath, but building hope and activism through slogans or verses of the Quran that I stencil, because I was very interested in graffiti and how people define these regimes. For some of you that followed the Arab Spring, a lot of the demonstrations started by somebody spray painting slogans against the regime. Matter of fact, people lost their lives just being caught spray painting. They would shoot at you. So I started doing things as my way of speaking against these regimes, you know, His Royal Highness. And of course, I'm not that stupid to just go, well, this talk is recorded, right? So, His Royal Highness. Anyway. And then His Majesty's throne. And the diagram of His Majesty is very simple. You know, his bathroom is this big, our houses are that small, toilet, plumbing, our houses, you get it. So, and this guy here was not only a phenomenon of the Arab world, but it seemed to be continuing in some of the first world countries. People think they're more important than everybody else, and vice versa, and they think they can just poop on all of us. What I saw as verbal diarrhea. Okay, so up to that point, you could see the contrast inside me boiling to the maximum, right? Living a very stark life. Meanwhile, I'm meeting millionaires in daytime and pretend, hi, nice, what kind of marble you like in your lobby? You like it white, you like it beige, blah, blah. And then you come back to this. And then, you know, the part of the human nature is that you always say, okay, war is not here yet, war is not here yet. It might be in the next town over, and then you say, well, it's in the next town over, and then in the next street, and you say, well, it's not in our street, it's in the next street, right? And it's not, oh, it's in your neighbor's house now got hit, yeah, but it's not our house, you know? So there's that subconscious thing of the human nature, which is, I understand, and that's happened to all of us, up until war showed up in our home, which meant that my own brother-in-law here and my sister, who was also at the time a very successful architect, this is some of his projects. He had a marble factory on the outskirts of Syria, and I was so infatuated with what he built to himself. And then, he also had this bloody Syrian passport. And post the Syrian war, if you had that Syrian passport, you would not be welcomed in any of these countries, regardless of the means or the education that you would have. So his only option was to ride the boat and cross the Mediterranean in the middle of the night with 50 people and make up, different identities for him and build a new life for him as a refugee in Sweden. And I went and saw him when he first arrived. I happened to be, again, another life's quirks. It just so happened that I was selecting marble for the tower in Italy, being Mr. Fancy Architect, and he calls me out of the blue and he says, Mohamad, I'm in Sweden, come see me. And I said, excuse me? Last time I had checked you were in your beautiful house with my sister, you son of a biscuit. What are you doing in Sweden? He says, I can't tell you too much detail, just come. So I did. And turns out, that he rode the dinky with photos of my own nephew and niece, and life had hit a stop for him, and he became a refugee in a small town called Virestad in Sweden. And just so for scale, he left kind of the established life he ran, and I saw him in that refugee camp with all of these nationalities. And to me, even being Syrian and Arab at the time, it caught me by surprise. Like, all of us thought the refugee crisis were about Syrians and Iraqis. Afghans today. Well, these are all the nationalities. So that's how the Unpacked Refugee Baggage show that you see upstairs got really planted in my head, because there was a mainstream in the media that was painting the refugee crisis a certain flavor, a certain way. But it was such, a global phenomena that I saw there, that how could we paint millions of people with one wide brush stroke like that? At the time, I had, as Alice mentioned, the artwork was recognized in the New York Times, so I knew that I had the means to express myself. I was comfortable with this artwork and this method, and I decided that now it's time to stop whining about your own homesickness, Mr. Mohamad, and do something for others. And help others, give voice to the voiceless in a way. So my art took a turn at that point, and you see me getting interested in the refugee boats. This is called Desperate Cargo, hanging from the ceiling. This is what you see inside it. Also Desperate Cargo on the floor. This installation was named Sea Garbage, and I started giving these talks with all of the exhibitions, trying to humanize and trying to share our own families' stories. Very quickly I became the baggage guy. So yes, you can laugh. I have a lot of baggage. So do you. All of us have baggage, and I got very much interested in this word. The way that it could be a physical and a metaphorical way in the same time. So I started making things out of suitcases, as you saw upstairs. I hope you guys got to see the show upstairs before you came here. Otherwise, none of this would make sense. Anyway. And then you see things like this, right? And gosh, you ask yourself, like, man, I spend 60, 70, 80 hours at the architectural firm. What is my impact in life? You question this stuff. And so you start thinking about, well, what is my calling? What am I going to do? So I decided that I realized there is an educational component to art that, especially in a very xenophobic, divided society, it's like no other way. It's more powerful. It speaks louder than any one of us. And I'm a huge introvert, believe it or not. I wanted to build a project that would speak by itself, right? That would play on this curiosity that the human beings have, especially with miniatures. I don't know what the science is behind it, but for some reason we're all attached or have this curiosity with miniatures. So I teamed up with Ahmed Badr, who is also an Iraqi refugee, and we met with about 12 refugee families in the New Haven area from all over. They were Afghans, they were Iraqis, Syrians, Sudanese. And so we sat, some of these families I had known for years. And so it built that common trust between us to kind of open up and tell me their stories, what they had left, what their life was like, what is the most they miss in their country or their home. And as an architect, I was always interested, was there a space in your house that you missed the most? Was there a certain moment, a certain windowsill, a certain living room, couch, sofa? We all have these minutes in our houses that we have a special relationship. So they would tell me their stories, and then I would take notes. And of course, word goes out that there's this crazy Syrian architect and artist doing this project about refugees. And at that time, by the blessing of God, I had been written up in these big media, so people knew about the work. So the suitcases you see upstairs were actually donated to me by people living in the United States, descendants of second and third and fourth generation immigrants. I'm not talking about Middle Eastern folks or Arab folks. I'm talking about German, Jewish, Irish, Catholic, everything. At the end of the day, this country is a couple clicks old. So knowing that these have been donated to me by these families, I invite you to go upstairs when we're done and inspect some of them. Some of them still have the initials. One of them is so old that this is, I think, Aunt Marie's suitcase is in this salon, and it's at least 17 something, because the leather is falling apart and it has stamps from when she rode the boat here. Stamps, right? The youngsters are going, wait, why did they stamp the baggage? It was the boarding pass in the boat. So anyway, I started modeling these stories in suitcases, and then with 7 hours of chat and a lot of tea with these families, we got out, a boatload of stories. Then came the challenge. Well, my preferred audience for this is not my echo chamber, right? Which is Vermont, you're quite my echo chamber because you're all nice people. Anyway, it was about how do you make a piece of art that goes to the other side of the aisle? Somebody that's going, yeah, let's kick them all out, Muslims, or let's kick all the refugees out, or they're all terrorists, or they're all gonna take our money and social services and whatnot. How do I get to that person? And the attention span of people these days is barely 7 seconds. How do I take this refugee's story that I sat and collected for 7 hours? What is that sound bite that I'm going to dilute it to into 20 seconds that somebody completely asympathetic to the cause would listen to it and go, wait a second, huh? You had what? You lived where? What? No, this is not this. So anyway, so that was the challenge. And that's where I think the artist's intuition comes in, because you're trusting your intuition and you're trusting your lived experience here. And that's where my corporate life came in handy, where I mingled with a lot of folks, and things would be said around dinner tables that shouldn't be said, at all. But it gave me the experience to pick these sound bites from the refugees, to put them in the headsets that you're listening to upstairs. And then, if they're interested, they would read the placard on the side. And if they're interested, they would scan the QR further and learn more about these families. And before you knew it, you would walk through this exhibit and you just met and feel like you have so much in common between you and the 10 families upstairs. Of course, I'm not going to go through the stories of each suitcase because you guys have the suitcase upstairs. Typically, I would tell you, but I'm not. Go check it out for yourself. But I'll tell you, I was asked today, what was one of those moments that surprised you? Farishte here is a dear friend of mine. She's from Afghanistan, and they are the flavor of the day today. Yesterday's flavor was Syria and Iraqi before, but today's flavor is Afghanis. So Farishta, I had known her for, God, I don't remember how many years before we had the interview. And she goes into the interview, and turns out she ran a secret school in Iran, defying the government and the Taliban, and teaching young kids, primarily girls, educating them in a basement, the basic alphabet and education, because they didn't have access to that. And I go, God, Farishta, this was like 2016 in the height of the verbal diarrhea we saw in the past administration. And I said, I've known you for years. Why have you not ever told me this? And she just simply kind of shrugged her shoulder at me, and she said, well, I didn't think it was a big deal. And I was like, what? Do you know the stereotype of a hijab-wearing Muslim Afghani girl out there right now? Especially in this country, in your new home? Please let me tell your story. No. For the love of God, no. She was afraid of the Iranian regime. And so anyway, I was persistent, and she finally agreed, and that's her mother. This is her mother's suitcase. Probably somebody in Kabul built it from scratch. It has no brand or nothing. It's completely handmade. So check it out upstairs. That's Farishta's story. So then you meet Ghina, and then you meet Maher, and we develop these friendships, a strong friendship that lasts for years, and I'm still in touch with all of them now. Maher went off to work for Google in New York City for a little bit. Ghina is an aspiring doctor now, and it's amazing to see the body of work from when we first built it in 2017, I believe, to now, to see the progress and how far people go, and really the success that they bring about. It's really heartwarming. And I wish we had interviewed thrice the amount of people. This is a verse from the Quran that I believe in, and I always kind of measure my work against. I believe in artwork that brings people together. The same verse is, we've created you from male and female and had made you into nations and tribes so that you would recognize each other, work with each other, right? And so that's the Quran that has been attacked all over. It says, work with each other, meet each other, respect each other, different nationalities, different religions. Again, the audience preferred for all of these installations is not the echo chamber, but rather somebody that has not experienced a church right next to a mosque in one setting, like you see in Damascus. So with that said, I think I'm going to stop a little bit now, and we'll open it for questions. But I'm keeping a happy nugget to share after we're done showing you the documentary, because, I'm going to kind of give it away now, but I'm not going to give it away. We're going to watch the documentary, kiddos, first, and then we'll give you the news. Should we turn the slide off? Through embracing vulnerability and through sharing our own humanity, you reach out to a wider audience. I realized by embracing vulnerability and just opening it up to the whole world out there and just laying it out cold, and you say, this is my own story, I can't speak for the world, but we're a normal family, we're just middle class, normal Joe. Chances are those refugees that we're welcoming in the United States are very much like this story, or if not very similar. So you hope by sharing these stories that you would build empathy, and somebody would see the common denominator in humanity. The good news I have for you, as I promised, we did meet for the first time about 2 years ago, right before COVID hit. And it's because I became an American citizen. Oh yeah! That's right. Well, I'm abusing that passport, I'll tell you that much. I'm abusing it. Nothing stops me. No COVID, nothing. They asked for 5 PCRs. I'm like, I'll put the stick in myself. Bring it on. Seriously. So, yeah, I just got back from Dubai. I saw my mom there again. She flew to Dubai to see me. My dad is there. He also got sick of me about 6 months ago and said, I'm going to Dubai. One-way ticket. Anywho, because, life is funny like that, it just so happens that Sweden, where my sister became a refugee, was the country that allowed this reunion to take place. So I don't believe in dark and everything has to be, dark and gloom, or what do they say? Anyway, there is a silver lining, and you have to maintain that silver lining, and you have to maintain hope in life. Otherwise, you can go into very dark trenches that none of us want to really be in. Hope is a generator of movement, a generator uplifting power. So yeah, we met. It's the first family portrait since 1999. You see all the siblings, the brothers and sisters-in-laws, the grandparents and the grandchildren in one photo. Actually, this is the only photo that everybody is in. That 1999 one was just the siblings and the parents. So, anyway, having that said, let's. Why don't we open it up for Q&A? Do we have time, Alice? Yes. Yep. So feel free. I am a simple person. You can ask away anything, and yeah, let's maybe get some light in the room. Sorry. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns, and we also have a mic going around. So you probably don't want to see my ugly face, so I'll put the slide up. If you want to follow things or share this artwork, these are my shameless social media handles.
I've got a question. Can
yes,
you hear
dear.
me? I'm curious whether you feel that Unpacked has spoken to and reached out to successfully to audiences that as you say are not in your echo chamber, that view things differently.
Yeah, well, I can speak to the experiences I've had in the exhibit. Of course, I'm always given great feedback about the exhibit wherever it travels, but one of the stories that I vividly remember is exhibiting it in my university, Iowa State. And they had invited me, and they had a beautiful museum like this one, and we put the show up. And so I was there, having the opening, and all of a sudden you see this group of girls coming in with T-shirts that said "Women for Trump," and I'm not an idiot, but in my corporate life, I learned to read body language and things like this. You want to know if the guy's is buying your $200 million or not. So, anyway, and you could see this body language of like, trouble is coming, right? They're walking into like, what the hell? Okay. And then as I watched, they start going from one suitcase to the other, to the other, to the other. Well, long story short, by the end of their tour, two of them, they didn't engage in conversation. They came to me with tears in their eyes, and on their way out, they just did this, thank you. And they went on their way. And that is a vivid experience that stays with me, like, ching! That's, they didn't talk to me, but that was enough. That was a message, like, okay, you're a crazy lunatic, and you reach too deep, but thank you. And so that's one story. Yeah. What other questions do we have up there? Did you guys like the documentary? Oh, good. Good. Yes, dear.
Two questions, just to everybody. Are you still working as an architect, or are you concentrating entirely on your art now? That's question one. And the other is, where has this exhibit traveled to, and where will it be traveling to?
Yeah, no, great question. So I think before COVID hit, I decided to take a sabbatical to focus on this art, because it really demanded my 100%, and it's these talks that I've given and the effect and the reaction of people. It was just like, Mohamad, listen, there are millions of people that could build these buildings, but there are few of them out there that are born and raised in the Middle East, educated in the Midwest United States, are Muslim, Arab, Syrian, but also American citizens, can talk both languages and build bridges. So I kind of had a early midlife crisis, and I kind of said, okay, bye-bye, corporate world. So I'm unplugged myself. Of course, my professional peers and friends, thought I was committing professional suicide. But I followed my heart, and it's been a great experience so far. So I told them I would be back in a year. That was about 4 years ago. Well, sabbatical is still going. Yeah. And the second question, it's been great to see where this traveled. It's gone as far as Kentucky, Mississippi State. It went to the United Nations in New York, and the UNICEF house across from United Nations. Secretary General actually came to this show. Nice guy. What else? We get a lot of bites from interest in Europe, so I think that's the next stage to get it outside. But I feel like we haven't exhausted the United States is so huge. I still want to travel and show it. So it's on the road. It's got its own installation team, and in fact, like I said, I'm an introvert that lives under a rock. All of my exhibits are word of mouth. I do a bad job, like most artists, in promoting this work. So if you guys think of anybody or any institution that would benefit from this, just shoot them a text or a postcard and say, hey, have you heard of this crazy Syrian? But yeah, the work has been really well received across the nation and internationally. Yeah. Other questions? Ooh.
I was wondering what your mother thought of Unpacked.
Oh, you're gonna have to speak up, my dear.
Oh, sorry. I was wondering what your mother thought of Unpacked, and if you've ever thought of doing a piece on her.
Anybody got that?
What did your mother think of Unpacked? Have you thought of doing a piece on her?
Oh, Unpacked. The suitcase. I have a suitcase about my mom. It's the one with the Victorian sofa up there. Yeah. That's the first one I started with. Yeah. We're a family that don't communicate with each other much, but we kind of send each other signals through artwork. Yeah. I don't know. The director got really lucky grabbing me in that kind of moment, because I've had internalized so many things, and they were just hiding in the corner. At that time, I was just freshly divorced and going through, I couldn't care less if there's 2 people or 20 people following me or a camera crew. I was just like, get out of here. I want to spend time. So they caught me in a very raw moment where I just I wanted to say that to my mom for many years, and I couldn't. So they just grabbed this, I lucked out and they lucked out to grab that moment. However, my family has seen the documentary, and we've yet to speak about it. Yep. Yes, sir. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so I'm another person who's worried about your mother watching the video.
Yeah.
And it sounds like things have worked out. She and your father are back together in another country altogether, is that right?
Yeah, they're not separated, but the way they put it is like, Earth cannot sustain 2 heroes on it on one time. So they oscillate. All the parents in the room get this. Yeah. You guys like to put us through turmoil, huh? Yeah, so if you stop the recording, I'll tell you what's going on. But yeah, it's the aftermath of wars is like, my dad is 80-something and my mom is 70-something. So they're like, let me be. They lived in 4 different lives, and they lived in Germany, they lived in Saudi Arabia, and she's like, man, I'm not escaping nothing right now. I'm going home. I'm living in Syria, hell or high water. Let me be. Not my first choice, but makes her happy. Okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Very interesting, and I hope you don't mind me asking some very basic questions.
It's working, yeah.
So I'm super interested in the how you make things. That's kind of my thing, is how is this made? So I don't know if you'd like to go into a little bit of detail about how you work with the materials, what your materials are, how you get the effects that you get.
Like I'm going to tell you that. Okay, that's a fair question. I get it a lot of times. This is my studio. You saw it in the documentary. So my studio is a very long, narrow space and very tall ceilings. And on the left-hand side is where I work. I'd like to think about it as the menu of the day, made by the ingredients of the day. The ingredients of the day are 1 million+ objects that I have always collecting, right? So it looks like a chaos. It's not, trust me. I'm not a hoarder. Well, maybe I am, but so it's an organized mess, right? So I have bins and buckets of things, metals, plastics, wood, fabric, everything, right? So if I'm craving something red visually, I would go to the red box and go like, break it off. Literally. So I would be taking too much credit if I told you I know everything I have here. I don't. And that's the fun part, is you go digging in these bins and you're like, oh my God. It might be an earring, but in my suitcases, they could be a chandelier or something. So that excavation surprise element over many, 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 many months and layers, and of course I work on several pieces at a time, so I'm jumping from one to the other, so I don't memorize the piece, because I want to come back to the pieces with a fresh eye to see what needs work, what needs more detailing, and I would be like, okay, I'll detail this side more. And that's how I work. Really, that's, and it's so fulfilling, because, am I in trouble? What? Are you immigration? No? He told me he worked for you guys. The nice thing about this way is architects will plan and detail the buildings till the cows come home, right? I've done so much of that. I don't want to do more of it. I want freedom. And so that's really what happens. Make sense? Right. Other questions? Yes?
Yeah, I turned the volume up on the mic.
So we can hear. So now, one of the things that I love in going through the exhibit, and I listened, I think, to all of the tapes, I love how, as you listen and hear the people talking, you then see the details, the coffee cup on the table, the car, and the, outside. With the interviews, now, it must take a long time to figure out, which, can you tell us a little bit about your process in terms of the, your connection with the people who are represented here and how you kind of close in on the parts of their story to bring to us?
Yeah, so by being part of the community in New Haven, being an Arabic speaker, I became popular with the refugee resettlement groups because I was the mediator in the middle, like, hey, Mohamad, can you translate this and that? And at the very early stages, we took part of supplying these needs, simple house elements. So trust was built very quickly, not very quickly, but it took, with some family. We broke bread together. We sat and, when they hear my story and my sister's is also a refugee, they're like, okay, you're not a news channel trying to get something out of me. Like, you are who you are. So you are who you say you are. So that, over the many years, I became very familiar with these families. However, it was very stressful to select, boil down their story to a soundbite, right? Because ultimately, you want to tell that soundbite to somebody that goes, wait a second, right? And at that point, that was just intuition. That was like my lived experience in the United States and knowing what the stereotype is out there for some nationalities, and so playing with those, like, let's pick this. And it served us well so far. And of course, there's always more information about these families on the website. So you can reach out to them, you can follow their news. We've, by the blessing of God, we had people moved as far as saying, Mohamad, I have a car. Do you know one of your families that they need a car? And so we facilitated donating house items, cars, you name it. One lady donated a full set of French Victorian furniture that she had to a Syrian family because she knew, she found out that in Syria, because of the French mandate, we were colonized by France. French Victorian furniture is very evident in our culture, and that's why you see a Baroque sofa in my families. So she donated that to that Syrian family, and so on and so forth. While in Vermont, people got moved so much that I had heads of school offer scholarships to the children. Ghina, the Syrian girl, her brother and her were on full scholarship in St. Johnsbury Academy. And that program, I believe, is still going. So that, I sat with the headmaster and we cooked this thing up, and he said, Mohamad, we've been trying to get a Syrian refugee in here forever, and it's so hard with the immigration. I'm like, Tom, you don't need to go overseas. They're right here. They're in Connecticut. I can get you 2 bright kids. And so, seeing that manifest and taking place is really a wonderful experience. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, please.
This is a very different question.
I'm concerned about your work environment, and I did see you wearing a mask
In the studio?
in the studio. And there's dust, and there's sand, and there's paint and fumes. You need to keep going and sharing these work and stories. So please protect yourself.
Yes, ma'am.
Your mother's not here. She is.
My mom sent you, didn't she?
And your future children.
Right. Got it. Promise.
I second.
Thank you.
I think you did a piece, it was in the back of the church during first night about 5 or 10 years ago. Is that correct? Here in Burlington?
So much for that.
Yes. Yes. Wow, you remember that.
I never forgot that. It's the only thing I remember from first night.
Good Lord.
And I was so happy to see your work in the miniature show here earlier, about 2 years ago.
Yeah. What the pianist's name that was playing that night? What was Vermonter.
And I only saw the flyer for this an hour and a half before I came to it.
Wow.
I was in Sweden. And I just got home last night, and I would like to have a conversation with you afterwards about a possible link to somebody who could help.
Sure. Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Wow, we have, okay, you guys are really nice.
I second that.
Thank you.
Prepare yourself.
Okay, got it.
We need you. I was an architectural model maker when I was starting out, so I love what you do in architectural.
Thank you.
As an expression, I didn't use it in that way. I worked with one of your competitive architectural firms back then. But it's interesting to see the use of architecture. You are looking backwards and burrowing into the meaning of family and home, and so often architecture is looking forward as creating somebody's dream, and whether it's be a marble or whether it's a home. So I'm curious about, that's just a statement, but I'm curious about where your art is moving to, where you're going with this today. Are you still mining the same thing you were mining in 2017?
Sure.
Is it evolving into something else or related?
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. And we'll end with that question because I want to be respectful to your time. The rest of the questions, we can have it one-on-one. Is that all right? Nobody left? Huh. You're used to this now, huh? Well, that's another call to prayer. Ma'am, did you have a question before I answered that one? Okay, just quickly. I'm working right now with the Oriental Institute and the Peabody Museum in Yale. And they have thousands of objects archaeological objects from our countries. And so my next project is to create a traveling exhibit that teaches our own children and the world the architectural heritage that we come from. So by recreating scenes of Syria and Egypt and Iraq, all of these architectural gems that are no longer existent because of the conflicts, we're going to 3D print, scan the objects, 3D print them. So a bowl that might come from Palmyra is going to end up as a mosque dome in my creations. And then the students are going to be able to go read a legend and say, oh, that, kind of find the objects and name them and learn about their own heritage and culture. So that's my next project. Thank you so much for your patience. You've been great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you really for coming. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to be around. So, no, my pleasure. My pleasure.